going to get going here. You guys should be seeing my screen with a PowerPoint up. We're not going to do a lot of PowerPoint today, but just wanted to have something to see it first while I talk. So last week we got together. We all got set up with Code Anywhere and VXML to be able to test a simple Hello World app. If you missed that, we've uploaded that to YouTube, and for anybody that needs it, I'm going to nominate Mark. You can let Mark know, and Mark will send you the link to SharePoint, which then links to YouTube, or maybe he'll just send you the YouTube link. As we do these, we're recording them. We'll get them up on YouTube, and you guys can review them at your leisure, or if you need to catch up or go back to something, they'll be available there. So where we left off last week, let's see, let me pull this up. Where we left off last week was we had built a simple Hello World VXML application that you see here in Code Anywhere. And we had gotten the URL for that. We had gone into VXML and built ourselves an application profile for voice phone calls with these settings, and then put the URL to our Code Anywhere application in there. And you were able to, looking at this contact methods, you were able to dial into whatever number they gave you for your app, and you should have heard it say, "Hello World, this is my first VXML application, goodbye," and kind of go from there. So today what I want to do is start to take this a step further and now actually start to build the application that we had talked about in the previous session. What we had talked about doing, let's scroll down to that a little bit, was building a little weather application. It'll provide a weather forecast. After the caller enters a zip code, we're going to use some speech so we can get some experience with that. We're going to have it provide the current conditions, and then ask the caller if they want to hear a 5-day forecast. And if they elect to hear that, they can hear the 5 days forecast, and then it'll disconnect. So any questions or any thoughts before we jump in and start coding this? Okay. So our application, we've got a call flow diagram here. We can see we're going to need to play some sort of welcome prompt. For today, we're going to start with just using text-to-speech, so we don't have to worry about having WAV files and where we're going to get those and stuff. In the weeks to come, I'm going to get somebody to record these prompts, and we'll get you a package of WAV files that you can upload so we can have recorded prompts and text-to-speach and see how those two play together. But you can see we have a welcome prompt, and over here in the shape data for this, we can see that that's going to say welcome to the forecast service. Then we're going to play a prompt that will say, please enter your zip code. And if then we've got some no match and no input error handlers. We'll talk through those. We'll collect that zip code into a field. Initially, I think for today we'll stick with DTMF as our input mode. Once we get that down, then we can introduce a speech grammar and allow the zip code to be spoken. We'll run a little quick validation step here to validate that they've entered a valid zip code. Basically, we're just going to be testing to see if they entered 5-digit zip code or not. And then we can call a web service to get the current weather conditions. So hopefully we'll see how far we get, but I think we might get through getting to the web service today. If we get further, that'll be great. But if not, we'll just continue on next week. Any questions so far? Okay. So right on into it. If you can go to codeanywhere.com and log into the account that you had set up, it should bring you into the screen. If you click on your box, I think most of you named it PSS VXML like that. But if you click on it, it'll expand down and you'll see your hello world. We're going to create a new file that's going to be the first page of our application, and we'll kind of get going on our application. So I'm going to right-click on the PSS VXML, the name of my dev box. I'm going to go down here to about in the middle where it says Create File, and we need to give it a file name. So we can call this anything we want, but let's just call this index.vxml. Index is sort of a carryover from the web server idea. When you go to a website and you don't specify a page, there's usually some sort of default page, and index.html on a web page is a common one. So we're going to call ours index.vxml, and that kind of tells us that's our first page in our app. Okay, so over here on the left, you can see it created it. If I click on that, I get an empty screen. So little trick we can do is if you had clicked on your hello world.vxml, it should be open as well. And we can copy and paste a couple things real quickly instead of having to type them. And that's this XML declaration up here and the voice XML or VXML version 2.1 header. If I just copy those and paste those, we're just going to need those ongoing. And then to make sure I don't forget, I have to close that, so I'm going to do my /VXML at the end so I don't forget to do that. So now everything I'm going to do is going to go inside this VXML tag. Okay? So first thing we wanted to do was we wanted to play this welcome message. And then if you recall what I talked about last week, voice XML is based on the concept of these forms, and the form is a dialogue. The way the voice XML interpreters work is when it loads a new page like this, it's going to go to the very first form it finds in the page. It starts at the top and works its way down unless it's told to do something else. But by default, it's going to find the very first form that it can find. So let's build our first form. It's going to be form. You have to give the form an ID. Okay, so form ID equals, and let's call this welcome. And just as a habit, I get in the habit of putting my start and end tags, and then I kind of bounce back up and put what I want to put inside of them. Okay. So inside our form, we're going to do a block. And inside that block, we can play our welcome prompt. So that's prompt. And then we can type in what we want to say. So this is welcome to, what did I say it was? Welcome to forecast service or something like that. Welcome to the forecast service. All right. Welcome to the forecast service. And then we'll end that prompt. And again, I think it was asked last week, but it's worth repeating. You know, all this indentation and all that kind of stuff is really to make it easier for us as humans to read it. So you can see here, I've sort of got my prompt, the text of the prompt, and all this in line. That's perfectly acceptable. If it's more readable, makes more sense to you, you can indent that and take it like that, so you can kind of see the hierarchy of how things go. However it makes sense to you is fine. As far as the voice XML browser is concerned, it doesn't really care. Okay. Now we're going to do a little trick here. I said we weren't going to have any audio files yet, like WAV files, like professionally recorded or otherwise recorded. But I want to show you guys something, a little trick that happens in these applications. Before we put our text, if we tell it that we're going to do an audio file, So if I say audio, SRC means source, and I'm going to say that I'm going to put my WAV files in a folder called audio slash, and let's say I called it welcome.wav. And then I put this text inside the audio tag. So what happens here is this. Right now, today, I don't have a directory called audio, and inside that directory, I don't have a file called welcome.wav. What VoiceXML does is it will try to go find that file, but if it can't find it and you've specified some text inside the audio tag, this is basically text-to-speech fallback. So it'll say, hey, I couldn't find welcome.wav, but oh, look, I've got some text here. I'll just use text-to-speech to speak that instead. Okay? So we're setting ourselves up that once we get the audio files, they'll play, but until then, while it can't find them, our app will still work and we'll be able to use text-to-speech. That's an important point on the audio tag. Most tags that we have, there's a couple others where we can go out and get other resources, subdialog data, some of these other tags, a submit tag, where we tell it we're going to go get some other file and do something with it. If it can't find those on all other tags besides audio, it will throw an error called an error.badFetch. Basically saying I couldn't fetch that file. So it will throw that error, and you either need to, put some error handling in your application to handle that, or you're probably going to get some sort of default, I'm sorry, I couldn't find that page, and hang up. The only exception to that is what we see here, which is this audio tag. If it cannot find an audio tag, even if you don't have text specified, if it cannot find the file that you specify in the audio tag, it will simply continue on with execution. So if you were to build a really cool app and you forgot to upload all your audio files and you didn't put any text-to-speech tags in there as fallback, you'd call into your app and you'd hear a whole bunch of silence. If you put the text-to-speech backup in there, it'll fall back to text-to-speech. Okay?
Justin, I'm sorry to what kind of a stack do you play working in MC?
What kind of, on Code Anywhere or on Voxeo?
On Code Anywhere.
On Code Anywhere, when it was asked for a stack, I did the PHP stack. That just gives you a basic web server, and for what we're doing right now, that's...
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry to do it. Thank you.
Nope, that's fine.
So, Justin, you don't have to tell it to do text-to-speech, that's just like the default. That it will read that if it doesn't find it.
It will read that. It will read that.
So there's nothing we had to do to tell it to read that, right?
There was nothing we had to do to tell it to read that, no.
Okay.
Probably beyond the scope of this a little bit, there are some things you can do to tell the text-to-speech, things like what language to speak, to use. The text-to-speech engines have different, what they call voice fonts. So you can tell it, I want the English male voice font, I want the, Spanish female, I want the French, whatever. So there are some things you can give direction to this text-to-speech engine on what you want to do. There's another option called prosody, which controls how fast it speaks things. You can speed it up or slow it down. There's a couple built-in things that text-to-speech will do, like tell it to speak a number as a dollar amount or a date or a time. So you can give some direction to it, but just putting that text between those audio tags, it knows that if it sees that, hey, I need to do this as text-to-speech. Any other questions? Okay. So looking at our call flow, we've got our welcome prompt. And now we want to play another prompt in our zip. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put that prompt that asks for the zip in a different form. So we're going to create form ID equals get zip.
Do you have to put it in another form?
You do not, but I'm doing that to show you how to transition between forms within a single page. So no, it's not a requirement. So now I have this form called getZip. I told you at the beginning that when the voice browser loads this, it's going to see the voice XML tag, and then it's going to look for the very first form it can find, and then it's going to start execution, which it's going to do. But what happens is it's going to get here to the end of this form, and if I were to save this and call it at this point, it would say, welcome to the forecast service, and then it would hang up. Even if I filled out the rest of the getZip form with all sorts of good stuff. So it looks for the first form and executes it, but from then on, you have to tell it where to go. And the way we do that within a page, there's a tag called go to, and then the next place we want it to go to, so next equals, and then I'm going to do pound get zip. And then that one's one of those self-closing tags that we talked about last week where it's got this slash greater than at the end of it. Now, this pound is important. Pound represents what we call an anchor within the current document, within this page that we're looking at right now, that says go find a form with the ID of getZip in this current page. I could do, if I wanted to go to a different page altogether for some reason, if I get rid of the pound, it's actually going to look for a file on the web server called getZip, which normally we put some sort of extension. So if we actually wanted to put that in its own file, we would do something like getzip.vxml, and then it would load that up and start executing that file. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to stay within the same page and just go somewhere within that page.
So just not to muddy the waters, but if we're going to put this prompt up above and not start a new form, would you have to do a new prompt tag, or can you do it within the same prompt tag?
You can do it within the same, but that first prompt is really informational. We're not expecting any color input there. This next one we are. So I can go back and show you later how we would, and I can do that for everybody. We can take a step back after I do this and show how we would combine all this into one, where there's one prompt that's information and one that's actually asking for input, all in the same form.
Just curious.
Yep.
Maybe. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so our getZip, so now we've got this thing that says we're going to play welcome to the forecast service, and then we're going to go, the next form we're going to go to is getZip. So let's start with our getZip form. This form is going to do a couple things. If we look at, go back to our Visio, it needs to play a prompt. In this prompt, you can see there's all these no match and no input conditions and that kind of stuff. So remember, no match is we told it that we would accept 6 digits. And if they were to enter 7 or they were only to enter 3, it would throw a no match. No input is kind of as it sounds. They don't enter anything. They just sit there. Then we would trigger a no input. And we have, so we'll introduce some error handling for that. And then we have to have some place to store whatever digits they did enter, assuming that they entered what we wanted them to. And we store those in a field. So again, it's kind of like, you think about this like a web page. You go to a web page and you've got to fill something out, a form out. You got to give them your name and address for something because you're ordering something, right? So usually there's some type of label next to a text box that you're going to fill out. The label is our prompt, and the text box is where we're going to fill stuff in. And you notice on a lot of these websites now, as you're filling in, you know, passwords are a common one anymore, where as you're typing in your password, it's got these little green checkboxes. Okay, yes, you entered a number, you had a capital letter, you had a lowercase letter, and you had a symbol. Okay, your password is good, we'll accept that. And then you re-enter your password and it says it matches. So it's doing validation as you're entering. So this is kind of doing the same thing. The prompt would be like the label, and as we're entering digits, it's keeping track of that. And if we stop and don't enter anything after, say, only entering 3 digits, it's going to say, hey, you didn't enter enough. I was expecting 5 and you only entered 3. So it's going to throw an error. Does that kind of make sense there?
Yeah, I relate a field to like a variable in IRD.
A field is like a variable. Okay, so a field, if I'm going to be really technical about mapping some of this to how Genesis IRD works, this field is that CED function, caller entered digits. And then we assign them. In VXML, we sort of automatically assign them to a variable.
Okay.
Okay. So let's look at how this is going to work. So we are going to start with, how do I want to do this? Let's see, this is going to be, yeah. So we're going to start a field. Now a field gets a name. So the question becomes, why does a form get an ID and a field get a name? And sort of the back and forth that Julie and I were having just now kind of gives us a hint to why that is. Anybody have an idea why I would give a field a name and not an ID?
Well, it's kind of like a variable name, right?
Exactly. So what's going to happen is when the caller enters their digits, my zip code is 85379. If I enter that in there, that 85379 is going to get stored in a variable called zip code now because I gave this field a name called zip code. And that's the difference between any time you see in VXML, because you will see this go back and forth where some things get IDs and some things get names. Things that get names are basically variables. Things that get IDs are ways for us to reference that tag from somewhere else. So that pound get zip code when we did the go-to is referencing the ID of that field so we can jump to it.
So it's like a global versus local?
It's not really so much that. This ID isn't a variable. I can't store anything in get zip. This just identifies this form and makes this form different from this form. It's location.
Oh, okay, sure.
You could loosely apply it to like subroutines.
Yep.
Sort of, yeah. Okay, within our field, then, we want to do our prompt. I'm going to introduce something else. Because we're expecting input in here, I'm going to introduce something called margin. So basically with margin, what happens is, am I going to allow the person to interrupt the announcement? If it says, please enter the 5-digit zip code for the area you would like a forecast from, and I hear, please enter your 5-digit zip code, and I'm like, okay, I don't need to hear the rest of this announcement, and I start typing. If margin is true, it's going to interrupt the announcement will stop, and it will start accepting my digits. If I turn margin to false, like I have here, it's going to ignore anything I enter, and it's going to make me finish listening to the announcement before it will let me actually enter anything. So I have to wait for the announcement to finish before I can actually enter anything if margin is false. So that's always a decision you got to make. Most of the time, if you're asking for caller input, you want to allow power users who know the application to be able to, get through the app. So you're going to turn margin on. Usually, we turn margin off on things like, your call may be recorded or monitored for quality. All those type of legal type messages that we would do. But just to show how it works, I'm going to leave margin as false for now. And we'll go back later and turn it to true, and you can see how you'll be able to interrupt. So what does our prompt say? Our prompt says, please enter your zip code. So we can do that same thing again. It's audio source equals audio slash, let's call this enter zip code .wave. And then the text to speech backup of that is please enter your zip code. And then we have to close that audio tag.
Here, how does punctuation matter? Does it, like, you know, I'm noticing that you're not putting periods or anything like that.
It does a little bit. If I wanted to say multiple things here, having the period at the end is going to cause it to pause.
Okay.
Put a little bit of pause between it like you would naturally between sentences.
Yeah.
So it probably is good to put the punctuation. The other thing you have to play with the VXML is sometimes you've got to do more phonetic type spelling and actual spelling.
Yeah.
Just like we did, we said, welcome to my VXML, and I had to put spaces between the VXML so it would know to speak the letters instead of trying to pronounce VXML.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Back on this field now that we've got a prompt, we also want to do something else. We want to tell it what type of information we're expecting. So we can say type equals digits, and then now I'm drawing a blank. There's a way to tell it the max and the minimum. I can look at that for a second.
Are you supposed to have it? Okay.
Somebody else trying to, what were you saying, Jody?
Oh, I saw that you didn't have the quote there. You had to type it out so you could fix it.
Isn't it max length?
Yeah. Now I'm going to do 6. I got to look at this real quick. Here's the thing that's really handy about this Foxeo site. If you're not sure and you run into stuff, if you go to the Foxeo site and you go over to documentation, under development languages, VXML, and you go down here towards the bottom, this element reference guide, and you can see all the tags that are, okay. So I can go field, and then we go type, and they've got some examples down here. They should have an example of this. It's modal field type sample. If it's Boolean, they don't. Okay, that's awesome. Type digits, question mark, that's right, max length, and semicolon between them. Okay. So what we're going to say is we're going to say type is digits, question mark, min length equals 5, and max length, is it length or len? It was length, okay. GTH equals 6. So this field, the type of field this is a digits field, and we're saying we're going to accept between 5 and 6 digits. And
Okay.
Julie, you were trying to. L-E-N-G-H-T, come on. How do you spell length? Okay. So the reason I'm doing between 5 and 6 is because obviously a zip code is 5 digits long, but if I want to allow them to enter the pound at the end, technically I'm accepting 6 digits. The pound is a termination character, so if they enter 123 pound, that will say, hey, I'm done, and we'll get the, hey, you didn't enter enough digits. But if they enter 85379 pound, we want to accept that, because if I say that the max length and the min length are both 5, as soon as I enter 85379, it's going to stop and it's going to try to move on. And if they enter that pound after it, if we're have another form right behind this that's asking a different question, then that pound is going to end up on that form, and strange things start to happen. It sounds like people are skipping menus and that kind of stuff. So you have to account for the pound in the length. Okay. So we've got our field. And when somebody enters something into a field, the field gets filled. So this is always fun when we're trying to talk about what's going on in an app, because it's, are you in the field tag or are you in the filled tag? So what's going to happen when, what do we want to do? Let's take a look at our call flow. What are we going to do once we get something? Well, once this field is filled, we want to validate the zip code. That's really the next step. So this is sort of an unnecessary step because I've already kind of accounted for it in here, but I want to be able to show a couple things. We can write some JavaScript in here to do a couple things. And so I can say if condition, C-O-N-D, they abbreviate it. So the condition I'm testing is zip code. Remember, we have a variable now called zip code that we defined from our field. Dot length. I never spell length right. And then we're going to do this really funky thing, and GT, semicolon. That and GT semicolon means greater than, but the reason we don't actually use the greater than symbol is because all of our tags are surrounded by less than and greater than symbols, so those characters are kind of reserved and can do funny things if you try to use them. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it doesn't. So it's best to use these sort of short codes for those. So it's ampersand GT semicolon. So if zip code length is greater than 5, or, which is 2 pipe characters, which is shift in that character above your enter key. That means or. Zip code dot length. I do it every time. So what do we think less than is going to be?
And
Big 6, wouldn't it? Oh, less than 5.
So ampersand LT semicolon less than 5, yeah. So that's the condition. Okay, I'm going to close my if tag. So what happens is whatever's inside my if tag is what is going to happen if this is true. So if the zip code length was greater than 5 or less than 5, and it wasn't exactly 5 digits, then I'm going to do whatever's in here. Okay? And so what we can do is we can say that, well, what did our call flow say we were going to do? If you'll notice here, coming out of here, it says no match, and replay your prompt. So the way we do that, go ahead.
1 second, didn't we make the max length 6 so that they could put in a pound?
We did, but what happens is
well, now you're just checking the actual digits, right?
Yeah, the recognition engine is going to accept 5 to 6 digits, right? And it includes the pound. But so what ends up happening is because the pound is a termination character, it has to accept it as a digit, but then it strips it off.
Okay, so it doesn't.
So what I end up getting back inside zip code is going to be only, if they entered 85379 pound, I'm only going to get back 85379.
Okay.
Okay.
But if you entered 853791, then you're going to get back all 6, right?
I am going to get back all 6, yes.
Okay.
then it's not going to fall within this. Right.
And then, so what will happen is, let's change this. Let's change the min length to 3, just so we can show what's going to happen with an error. Okay. So let me walk through what's going to happen here. If you come into this field and you hear this prompt and you enter 857, actually you enter 857 pound, right? That's enough digits. And so what's going to happen is the field's going to say, hey, my condition was met. I was told to accept between 3 and 6 digits. I got that. I'm moving on. It's going to trigger this field where we run our if condition. Now, we only entered 857 pound, but technically zip code is only going to contain the 857 because the pound gets stripped off. So we're going to be less than 5, and we're going to end up in what we're going to do in here. If they enter 8 pound when we're sitting here in this field after we've heard the prompt, if they do 8 then pound, remember I said pound is a terminating character, so it means I'm done entering anything. This up here is going to catch it and say, no, you can't do that because I was told you have to enter 3 to 6 digits and you only entered 1 plus a pound. You can't do that. So what will happen is automatically, without you having to do any checking, it's going to throw a no match for you. Okay, and we're going to talk about how throwing and catching works here in a second. So there's 2 places where we're going to end up with an error. The first is here in the field, if they don't enter more than 3 digits and less than 6. And the second is down here where we test to see did they enter basically 5. Everybody following that so far?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So we want to have a no match triggered here because they didn't enter 5. So the way you do that is you do throw event equals no match. Okay. So there's this concept in actually lots of languages, but in VXML of throwing and catching. So we can throw an event or throw an error, and then we have to write something that catches that error and does what we want it to do when that error happens. Okay? So there's 2 ways to do that. There's sort of the longhand way, and there's a shortcut way for a few of these. Don't type along with me on this first one because I'm going to, it's better for you guys to do the shorthand way, but I'm going to show you sort of the longhand way. Basically, it's catch, event equals no match. And then you would do what you wanted to do for your no match in there. The shorthand way of doing this, because these are no match and no input or common events, you actually don't have to do the catch event equals. You can just type in no match. Okay. Likewise, if they were on this field and they sat there and didn't enter anything, then it's not going to throw a no match, it's going to throw a no input. So we want to have error handlers for that. So on a no match, we wanted to play a prompt. In our prompt here, we said no match was going to be that was an invalid zip code. And the name of the file was going to be zip no match. So we're going to do a prompt. Audio. Should fill that out. Source equals zip, or no, we said audio slash zip no match dot wave. And we were just going to say that was an invalid zip code. Okay. Now, we need to, they entered something into zip code, but it wasn't valid. So there's a couple things we want to do. Number one, we want to play this prompt. Number two, we need to sort of erase what they put into zip code. And then number three, we want to have them start over. So we've got our prompt. So we hit the no match, we played our prompt. The way we erase what they entered is we do this clear name list equals zip code. And that's one of those self-closing things. So what that does is whatever was in zip code is now gone. So there's, because this no match is inside this form, by default, it's going to automatically want to reprompt. But just to be safe, we can tell it that's what we really want to do. So we played a prompt, we cleared our variable out, and we told it to reprompt.
Justin?
Yes.
I know there are ways to make comments in this account.
Yes.
Okay.
A comment in VXML is you do the less than, exclamation point, or bang, dash, dash. And then to close the comment, it's dash, dash, greater than. So anything between this is a comment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just move that ending part to another line, it would be everything in between, right?
Yes. Yeah, just like any of the tags, I can make this span multiple lines. And I'm real big on doing all this indentation so you can see what belongs to what. But okay. Then we have no input. So we got 15 minutes left. Let's see if we can get through the no inputs and no matches on this. So no input, we're going to do the same thing. Prompt. And close prompt. And audio source equals, and what did we say in our Visio? So no input was zip no input. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. So this is audio slash zip no input dot wave. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. The comma will actually put a pause in there. So. Okay. Now, there's no reason to clear the zip code this time because they didn't enter anything. We don't need to erase what they entered. They didn't enter anything, so it's still empty. So all we got to do here is reprompt.
And you said up above where it checks the length, if it doesn't meet the length requirement, you said it automatically throws the no match, so it'll just go right there.
In this length here, yes. If they enter fewer than 3 or more than 6, well, they can't enter more than 6, but if they enter fewer than 3 digits, it's automatically going to throw a no match. If they entered something. If they don't enter anything, then it automatically throws the no input. And then up here, we're saying, okay, that's great. You met this criteria, but we've got more criteria for you. So we can throw our own no match.
Okay.
So the question becomes, okay, so we got this is all great, but down here at the bottom, you'll notice that we have this max error count is 3, and we're supposed to say, I'm sorry, I'm unable to understand you, please call back later, goodbye, and we're going to disconnect. So how are we going to handle that? Any ideas?
Some type of loop.
Some type of a loop. So let's talk about some variables. So variables, we can use variables within our code, and variables kind of need to understand the concept of variable scope. Scope is a fancy way of saying where can the variable be seen from. Jody kind of hinted at this a little while ago about the idea of global or local variables. If I create a variable up here under the VXML tag, var name equals global variable 1, that variable is available anywhere within this page. However, if I create one here, var name equals error counter, because we're going to use this one, and we're actually going to assign it a value, so then this variable error counter is only within this get zip form. If we're in the welcome form, or once we get past this get zip form, that variable doesn't exist as far as those other forms are concerned. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And so the idea is that yes.
You said you put a variable there for the count to be 4. Wouldn't that be could you use a fixed number? If 3, then disconnect.
Say that again.
Variable means that you can put any information in there. Is that what we mean by variable?
Variable, yeah. So I'm saying error counter and expression right now. I'm setting it to 0 because it's going to be a counter.
Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. So we've got this error counter and we've assigned it a value of 0. So we put 0 inside it. So the way you do variables in VXML is you give them a name, and then an expression puts some sort of value in it. If you don't do an expression, it's just an empty variable, which is what we have up here for global variable 1. So here's what we're going to do. On these no matches, you can actually put a condition on them. And we're going to say no match condition equals error counter, and then we'll do that funky and LT semicolon, meaning less than. Let's make this a variable too. So let's say max errors. Okay, so I decided to make that a variable, so I need another variable. Actually, we can use our global variable for that. Let's rename our global variable. It's a global variable 1. We'll call it max errors. And we'll give it a value.
Justin, can we use the count inside of the no match?
You can do the count. So I'll talk about that here in a second and why I'm doing it this way. Yes, you can, but I'll explain here in a second why I'm doing it this way. So what we're saying here is for this no match, as long as our error counter is less than our max errors, we're gonna do what's in this no match. So there's another way to do this. The system keeps an internal counter of these no matches. And you can actually say no match count count equal 2. And so if this was our second no match, we would hit this one if we didn't have the condition there. The reason why I'm doing a condition instead of using the count on there is because what I want to do is I want to say I don't care whether they've had 3 no matches or 3 no inputs. I want the combination of the 2. So if the first time they did it, they didn't say anything, that would throw a no input, and the no input counter would be 1. Second time they did a no match. So now the no input counter and the no match are 1, but technically they've had 2 errors on my page. And so by doing it this way, I can say I don't care what kind of error it was. I'm going to keep track of how many errors you've had, and after you've had 3, I'm going to play you a message and disconnect you. And this is pretty common that we combine the no match and no input counters in a lot of the apps we've been doing lately.
May I see what you defined max error up at the top again in your global?
Yeah, right here on line 3.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so each time we hit this no match, now we got to do something a little differently. We've got our prompt, clear our name list, and then we want to reprompt. But before we do all that, we need to increment our error counter. Once you've declared a variable, once you've invented a variable and gave it a name, that's what this var does. It basically invents that variable. Then if you want to do something to it after that, you use the assign. So we're going to say assign name equals error counter. And the expression is, so what do we want to do to error counter here?
Add 1.
Add 1 to it. So we need to say error counter plus 1.
Do the spaces matter much?
Yeah, they kind of do.
Okay.
Especially when you're looking at things like this and less than thing, because otherwise it's going to get confused.
Okay.
Okay. Let's do the same thing to our no input. So no input condition equals error counter ampersand LT semicolon max errors. And then right in there, we're going to do our assign name equals error counter expression equals error counter plus 1. Okay. Following me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Last thing we're going to do, and then I'm going to kind of leave you guys to maybe test this on your own and see what it does, because we're going to run out of time here. The last thing we're going to do is, that's great. So now we've got a no match and a no input that handles if they're less than the max errors. What happens when they hit the max errors? So we need to figure out what we're going to do there. So we're going to say no match. We're going to create another no match in here with a condition of error counter equal max errors. Now, I'll put some spacing in here. It is not a mistake that I did 2 equal signs here. Oops. A single equal sign means I'm going to assign something a value. So if I say error counter equals max errors, that means that those two things are now, I'm forcing them to be equal. Whatever's in max errors is going to get stuffed into error counter. Equals is when I want to do a comparison. I'm saying, are these two things equal? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So no match, not con ID, condition. Condition error counter equals max errors. So when we've hit that max errors, then we want to play a prompt. Audio source equals audio slash, what did we say we were going to call this in our Visio? It was going to be called max errors stop wave. And the text was going to be, I'm sorry, I'm unable to understand you. Please call back later. Goodbye. And Julie, to your point, the punctuation now is going to kind of come into play here. It'll put pauses in appropriate spots. Oops.
Okay.
So, as you can tell from the prompt, we want to hang up here. Anybody remember what we did? We did it in our first app. Anybody remember what we did to end the call?
Disconnect.
Disconnect. Okay. Now, we're going to cheat. And if I just copy this whole thing and paste it down below and change no match to no input, because we want it to do the same thing. Okay. So now we've got a form that gets a zip code, allows us to accept between 3 and 6 digits, just to show that we can create some errors. going to say, please enter your zip code. If we enter somewhere between 3 and 6 digits, it's going to come down here. And that's going to text to see, well, did you enter 5? If you didn't, it's going to throw a no match. If you did, right now, it's not going to do anything. It's going to hang up on you. But we'll fill that out starting next week. Otherwise, on these no matches, we're going to check our error counter. If it's less than our max errors, then we can add one to it and play that was invalid, clear it, and reprompt. If we've hit our max errors, then we're going to say I'm sorry and disconnect. And likewise on the no input, if you sit there and don't do anything, it's going to do similar things. Does everybody kind of understand this a little bit? We can, maybe throughout the week, if you want to try this and call it, and at least see if you can get some of these error messages to play and get it to hang up on you. And then, send me questions during the week if you want, or we can pick back up next week and start going through and answering some questions if people have had a chance to try it.
Hey, Justin, those no match and no input conditions are evaluated in order. Is that right? So it checks the max first?
It does, actually. Yes, this will be evaluated. Yeah, that's a good point. We probably should look at whether we're doing this right. This is evaluated in order. So it's going to look at this no match and say, should I execute this one? Error counter's less? Yep, I should. If not, it's going to find the next one. So realistically, this no input, to keep things consistent, belongs up here. But it does evaluate them in order. It finds the first no match and sees if it should execute it based on the condition. If it doesn't, it goes to the next one until it finds one that it should execute. That means there is a little bit of a shortcut here for those that want to get a little advanced. Technically, because of that, I actually don't need to put a condition on this one. Because if we're less than max errors, we're always going to hit here. It's only once we've hit max errors that we would hit here that it would even consider that one. So if you want extra credit, you can give that a try. Not sure what the extra credit's for, but go for it.
Yeah, what are we going to be able to redeem that?
Yeah.
Is that like Justin Bucks?
Justin Bucks, yeah. I'm not really worth a whole lot.
The next corporate meeting drinks are on Justin?
Oh.
Sure, with my corporate card, as long as Archie approves the expense report. All right, guys. I have a hard stop, so and I'm sure other people do too. But
actually, just that meeting got canceled. So.
Oh, it did.
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Well,
meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a hard stop, so well, then it's up to everybody. If you guys want to keep going, I can keep going for a little while. If people have got hard stops and want to pick this back up next week, we can pick it back up next week. I'm going to leave it up to you guys. A lot of silence. Why don't we do this? First, make sure you're saving. Don't want to lose what you've done. And then to test this, actually, let's see if, who am I going to pick on? I'm going to pick on somebody. Jody, you're it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I want to test this page. I've called this page index.vxml, right?
Yep.
My old page was called helloworld.vxml, right? So somehow I've got to tell Voxeo to load index.vxml instead of hello world when I call it. I'm going to give you a hint. We have to go over to this application settings in Voxeo and look at this big, nasty, long URL. What do I need to change to that URL to get it to play index.vxml instead of hello world.vxml?
Would it just be the VXML at the end index?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're in your, if you're in your Voxeo account, you can just edit that to index.vxml and then click this update.
Yep.
And if you've been sitting there all the whole time like I have, your session has expired. never remember my password. Oh, I got it right. Okay, good. Let's see, I have the Hello World PSO.
Oh, so it didn't update for me. Okay,
Yep.
let me go back.
It might take a little bit. The other thing you can do is create a whole new application.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I have it as and I did the update. Now I went over and got my number.
It might take a little bit to actually get it to update. Let's see what happens with mine. That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, I dialed it wrong.
Okay.
Hello world. This is my first VXML application. Goodbye.
Okay. It's probably going to take a little while. So the other thing you can do is you can go into your applications and you can add one. Let's call this.
So, yeah, I have an internal error, so I'm reaching my new one anyway.
Okay.
So I just have to figure out what my error is.
US 46ML, nuance, and I need that URL. If you're wondering where to get that URL, if you're in Code Anywhere, I don't know if you guys remember, but if you right-click on your box and go to that box info, get this page, and this starting around line 24, it's kind of the third one that's in green. We'll give you an HTTP URL that's basically everything up to the .com. If you copy that, paste it in, and then put the /index.vxml at the end. Say create. All right, let's call this number and see. Let's see what I did wrong. Three 443 8713 dial.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been...
Nope, yeah, because I dialed wrong too. 213, not 214. 443 713. And it just calls me and hangs up. So one of the things you can do as we're doing this, which is kind of nice, we can go to Account, and we have, I think the application debugger will work. Or not. Let's see what files and logs, see if there's a log in here that we can use too.
Hey, Justin,
Yes.
can you get that back? Can I ask you to go back and explain what Chris was asking about doing it in order? Can you explain that again?
I can. So what happens is, regardless of how, let's just take no match. Regardless of how it gets thrown, either you entered one digit here or you hit here and we threw a no match.
Mm-hmm.
There's the voice browser follows something called the form interpretation algorithm. And what that says, it sets up the rules for how it's going to interpret what you see on this page. And so it says that when I get a no match, I need to go find an appropriate no match handler. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look in my form for a no match. Okay? And it's going to find one. It says, I found a no match. But, oh, wait a minute, there's a condition on this no match. Okay? And the condition is error counter is less than max errors. If that's true, then this is the no match handler I want, and I'll do what it says to do inside of it.
Okay.
If that's false, it says, okay, well, that one wasn't it. Let me find the next one. And the next one is this one here. And what I was saying, the extra credit joke was, technically, I should actually never tried this, but I should be able to get rid of this condition and have it hit here. Because what's going to happen is if I haven't had 3 errors yet, it's always going to start with this one, it's going to hit this one, and it will always execute this one. But if I'm beyond that, then it will go to this one, and I really don't technically need a condition because the only way to get to this one is if this were false.
Got it.
Now, readability-wise, you know, from just making things easy to understand, I kind of like having it on here. Counter equal max errors. That kind of, you know, self-documenting code kind of thing. You can tell from the code what's going on here.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Wow, their debugger doesn't work apparently. Okay, well, let's look at logs. Yeah, they need their debugger debugged. All right, so it's going to download a log. Let's see if I can figure out from this log what happened with my app. Shoo, quickly. Let's see. There's something that says hello world. That's not what I want. I don't think it's hitting my app quite yet. There's hello world. So the last thing in there, it's still talking about the hello world. So maybe it just hadn't updated yet. Let's try to redial and see what I get. Come on. Okay.
Welcome to the forecast service. Please enter your zip code. That was an invalid zip code. Please enter your zip code.
Yep. Okay. So it's working. So you kind of heard her speaking and stuff. At the end there, I entered 85379 pound, which is my zip code, and as I said, it doesn't have anywhere to go at that point, so it just hangs up because we haven't told it what to do if we get a valid zip code yet. We've been handling all the errors. But you heard her say her pronunciation of invalid was a little rough,
Invalid.
but invalid.
You live in an invalid zip code.
So. Would it help you guys if I sent you guys my version of the file?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I will put this in a file and send it out in an email with the link once I upload this to YouTube.
Okay.
Okay. So I think the best bet, well, you can either update your existing app or you can create a new one. But the thing with VXML, since they're giving us this for free, it usually takes 2 or 3 minutes before your changes really take effect.
Justin, I have one more question.
Yes.
How'd you get the URL again?
You
know that screen where you had the green.
You right-click on your dev box and go to box info.
Thank you.
And it's the third green link that's down there.
All right. Okay, thanks. So, where'd you get the logs?
Yep, where I got the logs, I went, if I'm starting at my account and I've got this page here on VXML, down here there's files, logs, and reports. And I clicked on that, and either their site's slow or my computer's slow. I'm going to blame it on their site since their debugger's not working.
Oh, okay.
And then in the logs, you'll see that. And then what it does is it downloads a zip of it to your computer, and then you can open it up in a text editor. And
Okay.
good luck finding anything. Their logs look about as easy to read as Genesis logs. But you should be able to see. Let's see. Let's see if I can see my column there now.
Yes, so I missed the first class. So basically, we need to get our own user ID to get into the VXML.
Into VXML, into Code Anywhere. So what I'll do, Ramon, I'll send you the YouTube link. I've got the last class we did. We stepped through getting everybody signed up and getting everything set up for that.
I'll drop it into his.
Okay. It'd probably be easiest for you to follow that, Ramon. But essentially, you need to set up a Code Anywhere account and a VXML account.
Thank you.
Yep.
That was weird. I was doing the same thing you were doing in the foreground, and you were doing it in the background. I thought, what the hell?
Let's see. Oh, it's still saying hello world. I'm not sure how quickly their stuff updates, but I still see hello world with VXML down here at the bottom. Okay. I think for today, that's probably enough. We'll get into next week what we're going to do once we get a valid zip code, because that gets into calling that web service, and we're going to get into doing a little bit of parsing on the web service. But at least now you've got something that'll play a welcome prompt. It'll ask you for the zip code. You can play around with it and see if you can interrupt the prompt. Right now with margin false, you should not be able to. So that's something, if you want to play around with it, turn that to true to see how that works. You know, in all of our spare time that you guys have to play with this stuff. So, yeah.
Speaking of spare time, if we're done, I want to hijack for a minute.
Okay. I believe we're done. Anybody else have any questions about the voice XML, VXML, Code Anywhere, testing your calls, any of that? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks.